Hello, 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 Breaking Gang. Welcome back. You know what it is. Your boy Joshua Taylor, founder, host of Breaking to the Future. We're breaking in all things future. I have an amazing special guest, super special, my big bro, Josh Rosenthal. What's up? How you
Hey, how are you
doing?
doing?
Awesome, man. Ready to get into it. Man, how we start the show is we always say the people want to know. Who is Josh Rosenthal? Break it down.
Uh
I know that's an open-ended question.
yeah, no, I'll keep it short and simple. People always love talking about themselves, but it may be kind of helpful in terms of informing what we're going to talk about because we're going to have kind of an unusual conversation. So my background was PhD in history, late medieval, early modern, Renaissance, Reformation history, and Fulbright at the Sorbonne Institute for Advanced Study. And so I was an archival historian. So I'd go around to different archives and get access to, wear a very nice suit, have letters of introduction, recommendation, and be able to look at documents, economics, correspondence, communication that no one else could get access to. They're totally permissioned and, and very difficult to gain access to. And so I looked at those documents and then kind of asked some questions about how communities organized and what they found valuable. Finished my degree, went and did a startup with my wife and a third partner, and it was artificial intelligence startup. We sold it to an MIT spin out, then took that acquired to private equity, then did another startup. Really in healthcare, looking at how to incentivize using dumb contracts and trying to open up some data. This was like a long time ago. I'm super old. This was like pre-blockchains. There wasn't good visibility and pre-crypto, so we couldn't align incentives. But we took that company and sold that to a public company. They went back private, and so we were vested out in 17, and then got into crypto at that point pretty aggressively. And what drew me to crypto was everything that I had looked at in history, in terms of communities, being able to bottom up work together and share value and have communication using these decentralized technologies. We can talk a little bit about that, but so we're based here in Louisville, Kentucky, down the street from Churchill,
Yeah.
and have been participating in crypto at kind of every layer of the stack, from limited partners and traditional venture shops to hedges to coin drops to NFTs to running some of the validation ourselves. And then most importantly, at least I think for the purposes of this conversation, we've been playing with the technology in terms of how to transform the neighborhood and everybody along the long tail of this socioeconomic distribution curve. So the building behind me was something we had run used to be a burned out drug den, and we had run a little helium node, and it literally allowed us to retool the building, and now we're connecting it for the neighborhood to the metaverse and doing some things. So
Yeah.
a former historian, did some startup stuff. Crypto popped on the scene. I said, this is just like what happened at the last Renaissance. And that
Yeah.
might be me projecting, but I think there's good reason to think that. And so
Yeah.
then we've been investing and participating in crypto all along the stack. And I'm super interested in people who haven't traditionally had access. That's one of the reasons we got out of the traditional startup scene, just because we didn't think that was so equitable,
Yeah.
and moved into crypto instead. So how's that? Is that okay? Is that what you're asking?
I think break-in will be able to break that down.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, full disclosure, everybody, I reached out to Josh when I heard his podcast episode on Bankless, right? Everybody know, if you don't know, I'll reach out to anybody. And so thank you so much for responding to me. And the crypto renaissance, right? We're going to start there. That's, the historian, that's where you started your career, your studies, right? And just, I think for this part, we wanted what we even talked about before the shows, right? Like break into the future is for, like you said, the long tail, which is just like people who weren't at the top of the dinosaur, the early innovators, right? We're still at the early adopter stage, right? Still very early, but for our listeners if you listen to this tomorrow or whenever we release this a year from now, right? Talk about the long tail, how you thought about, like, okay, it's something bigger than just like the people who got in 2017, 2013, the beginning. What is it about like the rest of the world? Because that's who we serve here at Breaking the Future. We serve the 99%, right?
Yeah.
So talk about your logic about like how you knew this was a renaissance. Like, whoa, all my research, right? The last however far back you went in the archives, like, wow, like you kind of said on Bankless and other episodes, like, wow, we're going to look in 1,000 years from now and say, like, this could probably be that moment. And what want us to be very educational. This is what we want people to be, have fun, but also learn here. So let's nerd out. I'm ready.
Yeah, no, sure. And when you reached out, I don't do a lot of things. I do little spot ones with different people, and you were just starting up. And like, what was so fascinating is you weren't just doing crypto, you're breaking into the future, right? So you don't even have to like say the C word crypto, like crypto empowers, economic reshuffling of the cards, right? And so like that's why when you wrote me, I was like, all right, this is perfect to have this conversation. This is the conversation I want to have, like about how crypto impacts people in real life all along this long tail. And so we can definitely start in the Renaissance, but that's why I was jazzed up. And yeah, full credit, the Bankless guys are great. And it is basically David Hoffman's idea. He was writing on culture. And it never occurred to me that anyone would be interested in kind of what was going through my head, or this idea of like late medieval history.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just made up, and it's not projection. There's some really specific things that were happening last time. So let me just take a couple minutes and take everybody back to like this other world that you might not know about. And it's like a world that might be foreign to us, but maybe it's not foreign to us. Like basically at the end of the Middle Ages, like the world was hierarchical, right? And there are people at the top, there are people at the bottom. There wasn't a lot in between. It was, concentrated power, concentrated wealth held in, an elite's hands. And over time, it just kept getting more and more and more concentrated and aggregated. And that was, it was religious, but political and economic. And things were, especially for those at the bottom of the pyramid, things were very tangible. They were, if you had money, you had land. If you're wealthy, you had animals, right? It was like things you could smell and touch. And you were so boxed in, it never would have occurred to you that you could have done something else, right? That was like the world you had been raised with, and that you had to have permission to leave your land, to join a particular job or a guild. You had to have permission. You wouldn't have thought to have done something else. The idea of kind of agency and autonomy, and it was very communally tightly networked as well. So everybody kind of worked together, even at the lower tiers of the socioeconomic strata. And so there was kind of not just pressure from on top to not do anything radical, but pressure from the sides too. Mm-hmm. And so, if you view history as kind of ticking and talking back and forth between aggregation, power concentrated at the top, and kind of communities, like decentralizing communities able to organize. And then if it goes back and forth, communities had tried this, a number of times before the Renaissance and Reformation. There are all these other Renaissances and Reformations, there's Peasants' Revolt and all these things. And like, they always got smashed basically every time, constantly. And part of that, like, so you might say, hey, what was different about the Renaissance that we think of when we see the word Renaissance? And when I looked back and asked that, there are two like real specific answers, and that was some of the stuff I found in the archives that was striking. Like one, they used it two different types of decentralized technology, not just technology, but decentralized technology. And so there's this advent of this ledger-based system. And so instead of having to have physical money and count it out, you could do credit and debit on a sheet, left hand, right hand. So ledger-based technology, which is very similar to crypto and blockchain, if you want to call it that. And that basically gave more people access to capital. They could do credit and financial products. And it was like magic, basically. It's just like when they invented zero, like it was when they rediscovered it and borrowed it, it was like magical. It changed the way they thought about it. And so there's more access to capital for people. And so at the same time, there's also this printing press, which was a new type of technology for communication. And so when we think of printing press, we think of Gutenberg Bible or something like that. But most of the printing, the early stuff that really took off was just these images, basically, just these big old images with taglines, and they conveyed super radical ideas that were targeted against that establishment, and they were wildly popular. This is like Luther, talking about this sort of stuff. And so these communities had financial underpinnings, and they had the ability to communicate. And if you can share ideas and incentivize one another, you kind of have everything you need. And so they were able to take down this hierarchy. And when they took it down, they reestablished these fragmented multiple communities, and they created, new economic opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to imagine, right? So this is like the birth of capitalism or proto-capitalism, or keeping a shop, or, proto-mercantilism. And so that was what was really fascinating about the Renaissance and Reformation, was them using this. And so so I started looking at crypto. We're here in Louisville, Kentucky, where everybody's doing a startup scene, and in the Web 2.0 world, and like doing a startup, it's about who you know, and it's about your Rolodex and who you have access to, and the way you create value is just to connect and connect and connect. Maybe you can get on early on a deal. You have to be accredited. It's just so there's all these bars and barriers in this, and we had done that, right? We had done AI, and we had done startup scene.
Yeah.
And so when we really looked at crypto, we're like, wow, this allows people to improve their economic situation, much more, in much better ways, and much more with a greater degree of open access than the startup scene ever did. Doing it through traditional venture, traditional kind of crowdfunding, or what have you. And specifically because crypto is using these same two technologies, like this ledger-based tech, like that's literally what we use, ledger, like right, left, decentralized, so no one's, you can't choke it. And then also this communication protocol, and you can call that the internet. And like we think we've seen the internet, but we haven't really seen the internet. Like historians are going to look back and say, hey, this 50-year block where we have this internet, it wasn't really decentralized, right? We had little fits and starts, but honestly, these privileged, companies, they can choke it, or they can choke it through a nation point state, or they can choke it through the broadcasting. And so only with Web3 and Arweave and Graph and like Helium being able to broadcast, and Akash or other things being able to process instead of AWS, do we have like truly decentralized communication protocols coming online right now. Yeah. So I'll just stop, but that was what was fascinating. And like we said, oh wait, communities can organize bottom up, and like and follow their values and execute them collectively by coordinating with underlying economic incentives. They don't need permission from anybody granting it. And so like instead of practicing your pitch for a pitch contest and spending your time doing that, you can go out and do your thing, like literally peer to peer. And we said, man, that's crazy. The last time that happened at the Renaissance, it created this whole class, basically. It got rid of the bifurcation between haves and have-nots. And so that was the promise of crypto that we were super interested in. That's a lot to throw at you, but hopefully that summarizes it.
No, like I guess to summarize it for breaking gang, right? Like historically, right, you had watched the old movies, right? You had the monarchs and the Catholic Church, and right, which is why we came, like, however you got to the New World, the West, you got here, and that's why America is what it is today. And Martin Luther, right, for people who know or don't know religion or whatever, he stamped the 95 theses on the Catholic Church, and right, like it's your memes 500 years ago, right? Like you said, so eloquently. And so we've had this, I think also this theme of like, I've been thinking a lot, like, how do you create global impact? And I think like, what are the things that people want or need? And I think everybody wants and kind of needs freedom. So it's kind of just another example of like an oppressed people going from one place to another. Just like how, came to the Americas because the redcoats, like those examples always go around, right? So I guess from a blockchain crypto perspective, how you kind of saw it from your historical perspective was like, wow, like we've had a big income inequality, wealth inequality in the West, right? We've had all this wealth, but now it's not coming to us. We saw this in the lifetime ago with after World War II. It was like, the wealth inequality was going crazy in the roaring 20s, 1920s. It's kind of like humans just repeat or rhyme the same things over and over again. So maybe if you're watching this, you're like, yeah, like, I'm a part of that person that seems like a have not. Or maybe you're watching this and you're a have, right? And maybe just because you're a millionaire doesn't mean you're a have, necessarily a have, because you still work hard for your business or however you earn your income or your wealth. And so, of course, politically now, right, upheaval and, is going on across the globe, a lot of corruption, right? The wealth gap is more than ever. You see the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google's, Apple getting like potentially antitrust, and up along crypto, right? This place where it might seem crazy, the initial coin offerings, and I don't know what this is. It is a scam, but like, historian Josh said, right? It's allowing to give a lot of people access to capital where, hey, as a playful example, I got in Doge when it was 0.00005 cents, and now it's like 50 cents. And I'm like, changed my life overnight. Was about, I know on the show we talk about, we know a little bit of the basics of crypto, but you're talking about as we come into like post ICO scam, which was 17, 18, you got a lot of time for developers and projects like Helium, Ethereum, Solana to build infrastructure of Web3. Can we talk about what Web3 is, what fascinates you about it, and how it specifically, like, how could we simply explain to people like how this is really a renaissance? Like, how is it really, like you said, like in real life, like you talked about like the Helium boxes, like, okay, let's get into that. Like, okay, how is this really going to change my life? How is it really going to help the have-nots? And how can I see it today so I don't look, a part of the inspiration for this show is like, I don't want people to look in 2025 or 2029, 30 and like, dang, I missed out on like creating value for me, my family, for other people. So it's like, okay, why should I hop on today and start to play around in this Web3, whatever that.
Yeah. No, let me just hit a couple kind of points high level, and then we can do some very tactical examples like blue collar, like playbook, like what can I do, like, right? Yeah. But I think like you said a bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah, I know. Excuse me.
No, that's super important. Like that, I just want to flesh out just for a second, because what you said was super important. So like, if you believe this whole historical thing, the point is you always would have been a medieval peasant, right? And now your life would have been predetermined. And now all of a sudden you can open up a shop and you have a house and you're supporting a family and you've changed your world. You wouldn't have been able to do that. And like those opportunities come along once. They're so rare where they just change all of culture and all of society, and the economic cards are reshuffled, right? The last time it happened at this scale was 500 years ago at the Renaissance. And like, that's literally what's happening. So this Renaissance, it just means like a rebirth of the world, right? Like the way to think about it is like reshuffling the cards, everything, politics, finance, money, how you work, jobs, culture. And so like, that's basically what I'm saying. I think we're at like a period that's like more transformative than any other time. So we're like, right now we have this massive opportunity. Like there's this old world with all these institutions that have kind of failed us, like you're hinting at, right? Like political institutions, economic institutions, educational institutions, like financial institutions, banks, schools, universities, all this stuff, right? Like just like in the Middle Ages, it got so accretive. It's like, it just like built layers of shellac on layers of shellac until it's like this super brittle thing, right? And now all of a sudden this technology comes along and it literally can tear it all down and allow you to build yourself up and work with your community to build yourself up like that. But it's like, the difference is you don't have to be a super coder. You just have to know about it, right? And so like, that's why I think what you're doing on the show is super important. I just want to say like two other things about that too, because it's like really those ideas, what makes this difference and like this a renaissance is like this puts retail first. And like what I mean by that is like, usually if you're an institutional investor, if you're working for a big bank or you're at a hedge fund or you're in a venture capital shop, like you usually have the advantage over the little guy, the retail, somebody who can hop on with their phone, right? Just you, me, anybody. And like crypto, it's the opposite. The retail can do things. You, me, anybody can do things that the big venture and hedges can't do, right? Now they can definitely do certain things, but like this is led by retail. So like usually you don't get opportunities to outrun the big banks, and like here you do. So this is your chance, right? And then on top of that, usually if you outrun them, what do you get, right? Like it's like risk reward. Oh, I learned some new stuff. Okay. I mean, it takes some time. It takes some effort. I may have to spend a little money. And like in the old world, what did I get? Like, oh, I'd have to kind of like work away and maybe I get a corner office. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I get a job.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe I'm going to start a company. Okay, that can be cool. Like we did that. That's great. That can be transformative. But it's like, man, that's a long time and a lot of effort and a lot of management, and it can be good, but it's like your odds of that working are so low, and even the payoff isn't that high. Crypto is what they call asymmetric, right? It's like you put $1 in, you may lose it, but it won't go to $10. It can be $100 or $1,000, right? It can be transformative at the drop of a hat. So I just want to say the things that are different about this time and like this crypto renaissance, when we get into some tactics, is like, don't ignore it, because this is different. This is different than this is different than like, if you wanted to get in on Amazon early when the internet was coming up, you couldn't do it as retail. It had to be like, like there were barriers preventing you. You can do this, and this will be bigger, is what I'm saying, than Amazon, than Google, than Apple.
Why will it be bigger?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So this idea of like, the idea of the other piece you said in here is this Web 2 and Web 3, right? So in the old world, like guys that are like super duper old, like, and you kind of remember this Web 1, right? Like this is like me, like, my professor's like, hey, you got to be careful about this internet because anybody can go publish anything online. That was radical, right? And they're like, it doesn't have to get checked, or peer reviewed. And it was crazy. And you had to go out on Netscape and it'd take forever. And so the stack was a mainframe was processing it, and you would access it through, Netscape or AOL, right? And then you would, it'd be dial-up basically connecting you to it. And you would have to go out to where the information was. You'd have to know where you're going.
Yeah.
And then Web 2 comes along, and Web 2 basically changes things. Like it's not dial-up. You have some Wi-Fi that's better, so you can do some things, and your speed is a bit better. And now the information is starting to come to you, right? You're using an RSS feed with an XML schema, which means that instead of pushing it, it's a pull versus push model. So now I go out, I browse with my RSS feed, and it comes to me. I can subscribe to stuff, right? So it's getting easier, right? And like that's the birth of social media, like essentially using that same protocol. But the economics in that, and Web 1, it was I go to a bank. They don't like the way I look. I'm not wearing the right tie. Fine, they're not into it. Yeah. And Web 2, I go to venture capitalists, and it's kind of the old bankers doing the same stuff. And like
this earlier stage.
Yeah, so I practice pitching, right? I'm gonna do your pitch and da 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 da. So like Web 3 is like fundamentally different, where it's actually decentralized, and that basically means it's like generative, and it means that you're an owner, you're not a product. So in Web 2, if you're not paying for anything, and even if you are, you're the product, right? If I go on Facebook, they're selling me ads. If I'm in Web 2 and I want to build a bit of software and you want to get it for free, or you only want to pay $10 a month, you're the product. They're spending all their money. They're raising a boatload of money, and they're spending ungodly amounts of it on Facebook and Google to influence you. You are the product. They want to get you to do something. And what do you get out of it? You get jack. I can use a thing and it's cool, but I'm spending my money. Web3 is different. Like number one, like there isn't a kill switch. So it's decentralized. That means the companies can't shut you down. So if they wanted to shut you down on this podcast, there's several points where it choke points, right? Verizon or Spectrum could shut you down, your access. Web3, like Helium, replaces that. The protocol or the platform could shut you down. YouTube could say, I don't like you. There's Web3 services coming out right now as we speak. We're early, they're coming up. Amazon might not want to process you, right? AWS or Microsoft might they might deplatform you. They might not be interested in that. Well, that's Arweave, Graph, Akash. So we're rebuilding this whole web stack that has been super tightly controlled by, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and now anybody can do it. Like back in the 90s when you'd use your laptop and they were searching for ET and you'd run a little piece of it. It was this distributed thing, right? Yeah. So we're removing all these choke points, and that decentralized stuff lets us it creates income generatively. Like when this decentralized technology hit at the last historical renaissance, it created wealth and value, and people had access to it, a magnitude of order larger than they ever could have imagined, right? You're not just farming and you don't go from 1 cow to 2 cows, you're opening up a shop, right? And you're transforming your world. And so part of it is because you can exchange in a marketplace directly with your peers in your community. You don't have someone in the middle who's taking a cut, but also that person in the middle is extracting value. He doesn't let you see sometimes, right? If you're an artist on Spotify, you don't know who your fans are. You only got to talk to them 4 times. You have to use a template. And they jam you in this economic model, and they treat everyone the same, as if everybody wants to pay $9 a month, and so you're going to get pennies. You might have more of a direct relationship. So
it's the point casino. Of the story is, the casino holds the cards, and they
hold all the cards.
They deal who they want to deal to.
No, exactly. And also, you're at the bottom of that pyramid, right?
Yeah.
You're the product. They raise a bunch of money. You don't get any of it. They advertise to you to try to influence you to do something. You do it, and then you're done. So Web3 changes all of that, decentralizes it every layer. It allows people to set up these business models which are new and unique. So you might not just like sign up for Spotify and get pennies on a song. You might actually use one of these platforms we can talk about where you're able to price whatever you want, and you have people not only interacting with you and paying real money for your music, you have people spotting you ahead of time or supporting you or get like all that sort of stuff. And then the other thing that's really important for your audience is Web3 changes, not just in the technical way, it changes the value proposition. It turns you to an owner. So if you use one of these platforms, all of a sudden you're an owner of that platform. And like that actually is generative, because now companies aren't spending all their money to try, it doesn't all get sucked into Facebook and Google, because as they grow, they're just spending more and more and more and more trying to influence you. They grow by giving you a piece of the company, right? And then you're like, wow, as I use it,
vested interest.
Now I have a vested interest, right, to share it. And you can say, well, that sounds crazy. It's like magic. It's like, well, if they're not spending all of the money to try to influence you through this, it gets really interesting. So like, that's this next wave of crypto. So like when you hear about crypto, everybody thinks trading coins. And like historically, that's always how it starts out. The first wave is like finance, and I'm trading coins. And then it moves into like kind of a little bit broader than that, into like work and how I interact with people. And so maybe not working for a company, but working for a DAO, and these DAOs have money and you can do that. Mm-hmm. And then the next wave of it is like this identity and culture. Like actually I can get paid to do the things I think are interesting and what I like. Like if my stocks don't really have value anyway, if it's just an IOU on Robinhood and I don't actually own the thing, and like GE is, or Coke or even Tesla, it's cool. But like, if I don't own that on the app, and if it's based on dollars and these dollars are just like fiat, if it's just if it's someone speaking the word and making it up and saying it has value, if it's just shared consensus, then maybe I ought to do what I find interesting and what I like doing. And like, maybe I ought to figure out a way to make a living doing that, like through value. So now I can create art and music, and I get not just selling NFTs, like selling my stuff digitally, but I have people investing in me through social tokens for my next creation. And then the next stage, which like nobody's talking about this, but this is the big unlock, is like when crypto isn't just doing finance and tokens, and it's not just doing art, and it's not just doing how you work, but when it starts intruding into real life and like reaching out to like the real world and touching it and like changing like economic fortune. So we can get super specific. I can give you examples of all this stuff, but like that's the big opportunity. You have an asymmetric upside. You're never going to have the chance again, like from a historical perspective. You don't just have to trade. You don't have to learn how to code. You don't have to ask anybody to give you a card or like your pitch. You can just go in and participate. You can do this through, having some money and trading, but you can also do this through just changing what you do, not spending money with Spotify, going into Audius and earning money, not spending, like playing to participate. So let me pause there. It's a lot to throw at you.
Yeah. So recap for breaking again. That was awesome. So it's like Web 2 was extractionary. So like, surveillance capitalism, which is like, oh, I could use this for free. This is cool. Google's free. Everything's free, right? Like, hey, if you use it for free, like it's cool. So it like lowered the bar for everybody to use products, right? Who doesn't want to use something for free? But nothing in life is free. Like the good Sir Isaac Newton taught us, right? There's no opposite reaction without equal reaction. So that law, my physics teacher said in college, there's no free lunch. So we've kind of realized somebody in the inside pulled back the cloak in Wizard of Oz and said, it was a scam. They actually are using your data. And I, as a founder, realized that trying to create a two-sided marketplace, long distance ride sharing, did not work. But realized like, someone reached out to us to sell these tens of thousands of emails we had. They wanted to buy it. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's why I got off Instagram and Twitter for a long time, back in 2018 and all that. But the veil is getting pushed off of that. I think a lot of people don't care about that, honestly. But we know the psychological ramifications of being online and how addicting your phone is and all that. But now it's like you can actually play and participate in Web3. Like you said, like Web 2 is about consumption, and you don't get anything out of it. Web3 is about value. You can create an ownership, right? And I think Miko, who is I interviewed him, super nice guy. And he said that when you buy this Coca-Cola, right, you don't own any stock in it. You just consumed it. You drunk it. It's awesome. But when you buy Bitcoin, you actually own the protocol. You own this you own a piece of the Bitcoin network. You could spend your Bitcoin as well. Just like if I bought a Coke, or if I, like you said, Audius, which is a music, it's just like it's Spotify, right? It's just like a music platform. It's a network. You could find musicians, you can create your work, but you literally, it's a true peer-to-peer music platform, right? Where you can pay them straight up. It is decentralized, where there's no true owner. It's just a network of musicians, right? And you could pay them straight up. I actually tipped someone on Twitter today, but that's still more Web2, because the algorithm controls it, right? A Web3 platform, they're trying to create the consensus around many different people. Let's just call the nodes people. So there's no one server like Facebook. Google has a server, like you said. They control, if, hey, Joshua, he's telling too much truth on YouTube, let's shadow ban his stuff, right?
Yeah, and you'll never know it. Like everybody talks about like the Arab Spring, right? And they say, "Oh, that was awesome. Look what Twitter did." That's not going to happen again. That was like, once they learned how that worked, the nation state, they know how to cut that cord. That will not happen again, right? And so like any oppressive regime, or even like here, like, so this model you're talking about, like the server, it like literally is everybody on every device running a little piece of it, right? It's like a little, it's like, it's probably too old for your audience, but like, you know, if you remember everybody using those old desktops and they do search for extraterrestrial life SETI, and they download this little piece, and like everybody would be searching collectively.
It might be old for me.
Okay, yeah, no, that's yeah, that's like a long time ago. Some of the old guys will remember that. Everybody downloaded this little thing, and like it collectively had more computer processing power than like using a mainframe, right? And so everybody would coordinate, and like they do the searching. Like that's what you're doing. You're downloading a little piece of something, like, so you're able to process it. And so they can't snip the cord, right? There's not one big cord. There's this resilient network. Like, like to your other point, like even if you don't care about your data, you say, I don't care. If it's free, I'll give it away. It's like, but what about the opportunity cost? Like, what if they didn't spend 80% of their budget running ads to influence you to do it for free? What if they gave you part of that, right? Yeah. So just to give you an example, like, you know, Uniswap during last year, so these things, if you just go out and play with them at no cost, oftentimes they'll drop ownership to you, right? So if you set up a little wallet and you used Uniswap last year, they gave you, $1,200 on average, right? You made more for being
I missed that airdrop.
But you made more for being a member of the nation of Uniswap than you did for being an American during COVID off that, right? Like, and that was average. If you look at people, that was only if you just like showed up. If you did things on the product, they said, hey, Josh, you're participating more. We're going to give you more ownership. Yeah. There's people doing 6 figures, $500,000, 7 figures, kids in Asia, like that were trading. Like, so it's significantly transformative, right? So like, so you can sort of go throughout, and if what you're saying and what I'm saying is true, then everybody's an entrepreneur, right? Like, and everybody's a creator, like everybody's a Renaissance person. And so like for your audience, like, what does all this mean? All right, I don't get it. They're talking like this weird history, and all the Bitcoiners are going to say, hey, we own this stuff. And like, you have these weird, political libertarian guys, like, they don't like the nation or whatever. You have like what's going on? Like, here's the way to think about it. Like, someone doesn't have all the cards. They don't get to decide. Like, when we hire someone, we look at the wallet address, and they're anonymous. I don't care what color they are. I don't care how old they are. I can literally see what they're doing, right? When you want to get a loan in an automated market maker, no one's looking at you. They're literally just doing it instantly. You're not going into a bank. They're not making a decision. So there's like massive access. And then like, you own a piece of it, right? So just starting at like the most basic thing. So here's like things your audience can do, right? Like, so you can go on and you can buy like a bit of cryptocurrency, right? You can use like, there's all these different apps and ways to go about that. And like, when you own that, you don't just own a stock, you own a bit of that network. You own a bit of that protocol. Yeah. You don't just own like Gutenberg's shop. You just don't own the printing press. You own like the print protocol. You own like the www, right? Like it's like getting a piece of that. Like, that's like really, really different. And so that's like crazy, right? And like, just like, so pause on that. And then the next thing you can do is you can basically take anything you like to do in the real world and say, hey, instead of me paying money to do that on somebody's platform where I'm the product and I don't get anything out of it, if I'm drinking Coke, I can drink this crypto Coke, and all of a sudden I own, just by drinking Coke.
Yeah.
I own part of Coke, right? So like, hey, I like video games. Okay, fine. Like maybe I go play Axie, right? And now I'm playing Axie, and like instead of me just like handing over dollars to Epic or whatever, like I'm earning a piece of this, right? And like people are earning livings off it, like all throughout the world. It like empowers everybody, right? And so, all right, maybe I'm not into Axie because like that's not my thing. So like there's you like Animal Crossing, go check out My Neighbor Alice. That's coming out on Binance. So I like high res, like crazy. I'm Grand Theft. I want like PlayStation 5. Okay, go check out like Wilder World. Like, so some of these are out right now. Yeah. Some of these are coming like as we're speaking, but like you literally go on and do it. And instead of me buying some tokens and then giving it over to like Epic or whoever the public company is, I buy them and like I'm able to use them. And these things accrue value. And by doing things in the world, I'm earning more money. I can trade it for dollars in my wallet, or I can start doing that as like my job, right? I can start charging rent in the metaverse. I can it's not just like super virtual. These environments, like if I'm into video games, so I'm on chat, I get a group of people together, we're doing stuff. These are DAOs. They're like decentralized accountability organizations. They're spinning up, right? Mm-hmm. Like while they're spinning up, like organizations. If I sketch, I basically can go into like one of those environments and like spin up a DAO and get paid to do my sketching. Yeah. If I code in Unreal, I can go do that. And so like, if I just want to play, fine, I'm just doing that. So that's like doing video games. And then you can go into music, and you can go into like Helium, and you can go into NFTs and all that sort of stuff too. But let me stop there.
Yeah, I know it. It's a lot. Even, I mean, we understand it, and it could be a lot for us because we're just excited about it. But I want to talk about like, okay, so it seems like we're saying, okay, there's going to be a new Amazon that's decentralized. There's going to be a new there's going to be a new Coke, or maybe not a physical product. But like, right, there's these new things, and you're just the next iteration of the internet is replacing them. Is that what you're saying? Like, can they exist together as well?
Yeah. No, it'll replace it basically, and like they'll exist. There probably will be just like there was in history. The Roman Catholic, they kept doing their thing, and the Pope kept on going. But now, for the first time, you didn't have to be in that system. You didn't have to be at the bottom of that pyramid. You could organize. You could immigrate. You could set up a shop. You didn't need permission. So that'll be there for sure. But like, if you're using Amazon as an example, like there's going to be crypto versions of everything that we know right now. There will be a crypto version of Amazon. And when you use them, when you stream, you'll earn money for streaming instead of the other way around. When you get a product shipped, you'll earn money for having the product shipped, right? Like the thing you were talking about with Audius is like a great example. Like with Spotify, I basically pay them money. And maybe it's just me and you, so we don't think about it. It's just $10 a month. But if I'm down the street from here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm running a restaurant, I have lawyers calling me up all day long saying, hey, I know you're not paying like licensing rights, right? You're supposed to pay $15,000 to BMI to run your bodega. So like, if I'm running a shop, I don't have to do that, and I don't have to just play the radio. I can use Audius, and all of a sudden I've removed this, and my employees aren't mad. And like, basically, I don't have to pay this $15K. Yeah. But more than that, I'm earning their token, right? The more I listen, the more I earn. Yeah. And then maybe I say, hey, you know what? I'm only making a little bit of money with my restaurant, but or maybe I'm driving Uber. I know guys making more off Audius like driving Uber than like while they're driving for listening to it, right? It's like transformative, like because they're stacking it. Like, so I earn more like when I make a playlist, right? So if I have a restaurant, so if I'm listening, I earn a little bit. If I have a playlist, I'm earning more. If other people are using my playlist, if I actually create the music and people are listening to that, like I'm earning as I go along. Like, so that's like a different way of
earn on SoundCloud, right? Like you.
Yeah. I don't have to pay the instead of money coming out of my pocket and going to the corporation. It isn't even a company. It's this decentralized. It's this DAO, right? It's like we're all co-owners. It's like a co-op. If you're trendy in New York, or if you're out here in Kentucky, it's like a Grange. I mean, it's like everybody has shared ownership. And yes, you can buy the token. You can go on an exchange and you can buy the token. But you don't have to do that. You can just say, hey, I'm going to quit giving my money to Spotify, and I'm going to start giving my money to like my community, which I have a piece of, right? Like it's a different way of thinking about it. And then I can take some of it out to live on, or I can just say that's my investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and you can do the same thing with like all the way up and down the stack. So that's your music, right? So you're doing that, and like that allows you, like, just like let's believe this Spotify Audius example, because I think it's a really good one. So in the Spotify world, like you have somebody holding the cards, right? If you're an artist, you want to do something, you're not going to make any money on Spotify if you put up some music. That's not going to happen. And like, how would you build your audience? Well, they tell you how you can interact with them. They never let you see the email addresses, right? It's one thing like if you're doing a startup and somebody's trying to buy those addresses. But if I'm listening to your music and I want to give you my address and say, hey, like I want like some other sort of relationship and I want to like to support you basically, and you want to know like, hey, I like this and I live here and I'd be happy to pay more than just a few pennies for some songs. I'd actually really like to own like something like, you know, think of it as like, you know, one CD off Wu-Tang, right? Like I want to own this thing, right?
Yeah.
And like maybe actually, you know what, I like you so much, I want to support you, right? I want to buy your stock and your social token. Like, I can't do any of that in that Web 2.0 world because I have somebody in the middle, and they're not going to let me do that, right? And they're not going to let you do that. But with Web 3, like I'm gaining ownership of the thing I use by using it, right? Like wrap your head around that. Yeah. It's like, you know, when Amazon came on, you couldn't get stock early enough, right? Like Massachusetts outlawed, or Apple, like Massachusetts said, it's too risky. We're not going to let you buy it. Like imagine if every time you bought an iPhone, you owned a piece of Apple. And like if you did that early when Apple was first coming out, right?
All the Apple fanatics, right? Like even before the iPhone, right? Like you'd be
no, that's how like beach. No, like I'm so old. We use these little Macs that had little tiny screens. Imagine if you bought one of those. Imagine if they just gave you one share when you bought one of those, right? What that would be worth today. That's what's happening in crypto, right? Yeah. If you use the thing, it's just like the very first, like way before iPhone, when they used those gray like boxes and it had the little screen. If you get one of those, that's like 5, 6, 7 figures, right? If they're giving you like just imagine if they gave you a piece of that. That's what's happening in crypto. If you buy the thing or use the thing, they're giving you ownership in it. They're not giving it to the Web 2.0 guys for advertising. They're giving you ownership, so you're evangelizing it, but also because like they think that's good. They actually think, just like in the Renaissance, it's generative. It actually creates more, not just more equitable value, but not just a bigger piece of the pie, but a bigger pie, like all together. So it's like a very different approach to it. So you don't have to go out and trade Doge. You can do it if you want to. You can just say, hey, maybe I want to listen to this crypto thing where they give me ownership for doing it if I listen to it. Or maybe if I'm drawing, instead of putting it out, I want to put it out as an NFT. Or maybe instead of writing, I want to do it through a crypto platform instead of me paying, right? Yeah. Or maybe if I have property, if I'm paying rent to somebody, maybe I'll run this little helium antenna and like I don't need to know how to code. I don't need to know how to validate. I literally plug the thing in, and like full disclosure, we either support these guys or we love them or we hate them, or it's like we're not neutral. We're like all over the place, right? Or we couldn't get in. But like the point is like I run this little box and like depending upon when you get in, like it's earning for you over years, right? 5 figures, 6 figure, like it's crazy, right? Like they're just bringing 5G. These major cell carriers were going to sue them. Now they're partnering with them, right? Yeah. Like imagine if you could have gotten in like when the cell phone was just coming online, right? Like you can get a box, run the thing on your phone. Like if you don't dig helium, it's okay. Like just like the point of the story is like you don't just have to be trading coins. Whatever you're doing, you can do it in crypto, and they give you ownership. Like, and you actually can create value without having a boss tell you what to do.
Yeah. So it's like decentralization is essentially a centralized node, right? A centralized world is like leaders of these big companies, leaders of these nations, right? Like President Biden or President whoever in your country, right? And these governments really top-down leadership, right? Trickle-down economics, where the bottom of the stack gets the few. But you're saying if you spread that out and everyone could be their own boss in a say, or own, like they can choose on these. If a network is decentralized and there's not one owner, I guess in a sense, like, would that bring more chaos? Don't most people want to be told what to do? Like, how does that really work in reality when we see so much chaos? We are in a leadership crisis. Like, I guess there's like the cool part where we're talking about, like, that would be dope. Like, people are making livings off this, or even potentially fortunes. Like, I don't want to go because I have a lot of thoughts, but like, okay, at first, like, that's the first part. Is like, it's like, okay, how do you have this real decentralized world? Wouldn't that create more chaos? But then also it's like, I see the opportunity, right? For audience, if I'm an artist, and basically if we're basically saying, dang, these Web2 platforms really helped the kind of like the shareholders early on make the big bucks, but not really the consumers. So you're saying anyone, if you love this company and you get it, and the more you participate and add value, you're gonna get more out of it. So like the first part is like, is this really like, can society really be that decentralized? Like, and that like everybody's doing their own thing.
Man, you're asking. This is so good. So it's like, and also, just to also clarify, you can do it. You can obviously like buy on an exchange. That's one way to do it. You can participate. You can play to earn your video game. You can listen. Yeah. You can create your art. You can write. You can, and also, if you're not into any of that, if you're just like good at project management or writing or just whatever, you can also just join a DAO. Find the thing you like. And lots of times they have this thing called a DAO, and it has a treasury, right? And this treasury is a big pool of money, and they're looking for labor. They're saying, how do we spend this money? We need people to manage a community. We need people to do posts. We need people to code. We need people to do education. Like, you can literally work for a DAO. And like, lots of times it's not like a hiring manager saying, I like the way you look and I like your resume. It's like literally your peers saying, hey. And oftentimes it's based on what you do, right? They're looking at. So just also, there are also ways like just to work, just completely not for a company or corporation, but for one of these DAOs. And like, to your overall point, like, is it chaotic? Like, the answer is like, yes, like hell yes, it's chaotic. It's completely chaotic. But let me just like, this is where history is really helpful. So like, let's just like take a minute back, right? Like, I start off talking about, I read these wacky documents, you know? And no one could get access to them. It was like me, and there can only be 2 people in there. And like, if you like, just even today, right? Even then,
chambers of like the ancient text.
Yeah. And all of a sudden the printing, and like, because those authorities controlled who could create this text and who could view it and how it would be interpreted. Then the printing press comes along, and they're just cranking this out, and anybody can print anything at any time, right? The authorities tried to regulate it. They tried to say, you can print, you can't print. But it didn't matter. They went into back rooms and started cranking stuff out there, right? And so like, they thought the world was ending. They said, whoa, what'll happen? Like, I know for the professional historians, I'm well aware I'm oversimplifying, but I think it's important to understand. It was shocking to them, right? They're like, wait, anyone can print anything? How will we know it's true? How will we know it's real?
It's like Wikipedia.
My voice was my voice. I don't want to listen to your voice, right? It was like my old professor at a junior college, right? Just starting out, he was like, well, anybody, they can't peer review it. You can put up anything on the internet. It's like, it freaked him out because his career was made on saying this is right and this is wrong. So yeah, it is absolutely chaotic, but it gives access to everybody, right? So now you can print something, right? And like, the thing is, it can make markets. Like, just to use this printing press example, when at the time of the printing press, only 5% of the population could read, right? It wasn't a good invention, right? And so like, but it made the market. As it started doing its job, all of a sudden people said, wow, this is crazy. And then like, they actually learned to read, and the market exploded, right? It created a market out of nothing for itself. And so that's kind of the same thing. Like, so yeah, it is the government. Like, when Apple first wanted to get listed, you know, the states, they said it's too risky. We won't let you do that, right? So you missed out on Apple if you lived in this geography. And like, now that's not the case. You can like literally do this. So it's like absolutely chaotic. But like, in some sense, it's like a lot fairer, right? Because anybody has access to it. And like, the barrier to get in is not how much money I have, whether I'm accredited. It's not my Rolodex because I'm schmoozing along. It's not because I'm awesome at the social media game and I'm really good at doing pitches for the VCs to try to give me a little bit of money. It's like, literally, like, if I know about this thing, and if I think about it, and if I'm into it and I want to participate, I can do it. Like, it's just education and knowledge is all. And, or like, if you want to use a modern example, right? Like, every time it's decentralized, people freak the frick out every single time, right? Like, just like printing press, or like, maybe you're doing like maybe it's like the rise of the corporation, right? Like, once upon a time, these guys were called oil barons and railroad tycoons because you couldn't have access to capital or a company. It was private because it was indemnified through liability. There was no, to become a limited liability corporation, it literally needed an act of parliament, right? And so it was you and your family, and nobody else got in. And then they said, hey, you
Easy.
want to give access through an LLC to anybody. And everybody freaked the frick out, just like they always do. Their newspaper saying, this is awful. When a train goes off the tracks, anybody can get sued. Who are we going to da-da-da-da-da? But like when they did that, that allowed fractionalization, which allowed decentralization, which meant you could own a piece of like Lionel Railroad, right? Or you could own a piece. So it allowed the stock market, right?
Yeah.
And so then like instead of 5 families, which might donate libraries and build big banks, now it's some more people who get into it. Yeah. Carnegie, JP, whoever you want to pick, right? Like
Echo Island.
Yeah, no, exactly. So now you get access to it. And so now it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, it will be chaotic, but you can actually have access to this, right? Like every single time that happens. So like, don't wait, man. Like rarely does the door open and you can just like bust right through it. And like the gains are so big, you don't need to know how to code like in the Web 2.0 world or be slick and like raise money in the Web 2.0 world. You can literally buy the token, you can participate, or you can just work for the DAO. Like, so just like, you don't get these chances. Like rarely in history do you get these chances. So take advantage of it.
Nice. So this is really cool. So I think it's also, I have 2 questions. So
yeah.
I guess to the next part was like everything Web 2 that we kind of see, right, will be transformed. Microsoft, if you could think of a cool company, it might be Web 3, right? It could become a Web 3 that will take over and surpass it one day, right? Also, I think there's also things that doesn't exist today, like that will appear, right? Like we didn't even know a social media manager or consultant or like an influencer. Like that was the start of like Web 2 was like having a voice, right? Like and being able to, I think it was good for the time. Like, hey, you could use Amazon Marketplace, you could use Shopify, you could use YouTube, you could use Twitter. People have made livings and they have made people here. It has gained access, right? SoundCloud are these platforms, right? If you weren't Tupac or like Jennifer Lopez or Selena, rest in peace, a lot of these artists, but like, you know, like if you weren't in the big studios, right, you weren't getting time. Now, right, everyone has a voice. Instagram, you could millions of followers, thousands, even the micro influencer, right? But like we've said, these companies have gotten so big, the billions of dollars of valuations, the public companies, it's like, dang, like, what do I get out of it? I don't even own my publishing. I don't even own anything. I'm still sad, right?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me trying to thirst for likes and attention, really. Steve Jobs, right? RIP him too. He got it. He knew it 30 some years ago, right? The use for attention. But now it's like, right, the value, the ownership, which we're saying, okay, let's just like copy and paste on top of decentralization. Are there things you're seeing? And this is what I try to like go in my chamber. Like, what are we not thinking about? Like, I think there's so much gross domestic product, so much wealth of the future, a future world. It's kind of like Ready Player One, full disclosure. It's one of my top movies. Hopefully it's not like that movie exactly, but I think there's worlds and different things and jobs and just things that we haven't even thought of. What do you think about that?
Oh man, that's like, you're asking all these big questions and loading them up. So like, yeah. So like if in Web 2.0, you got a voice, in Web 3.0, you get paid for your voice, right? Like you own your voice, right? Like in Web 2.0, I get to share this picture and I have my profile and my avatar and I click on it and I share it. In Web 3, I own that piece. I own that piece of my identity, right? Like I actually have the on-chain right ownership for the NFT. Yeah. So I'm not just putting out my picture. I actually own a piece of that. And so like that's really important because like instead of just being an influencer and I'm just like an aggregation, right? I only get a little slice of what the middleman leaves me. And so I just have to get stupid numbers to make it even like remotely viable. And I don't own jack at the end of the day, right? Like, and so like it creates all sorts of bad incentives to be the loudest, all sorts of bad incentives, right?
People
and so like
anything to get a follow or get the paid partnership, right? It's like being loud. You get paid for being loud. It's like, I think that's confusing for a lot of people, or it's disheartening.
Exactly. But what if you can make what if you could make more financially for a very thin slice of followers, and they could make money more than just paying it to the company again? And like, then you're just not screaming at each other. Like, you can have a more meaningful conversation and relationship and actually work together to accomplish goals. It just changes everything bad about that. And so like, yeah, no, you're 1,000% right. There'll be something new and general, just like a medieval farmer. Like, we're farmers, right? And we're looking around and we're like, hey, I don't get exactly. I don't get this idea. Like, I can't conceive of the idea of like running a shop, right? Like that, running like a or carrying a ledger. That doesn't. I think money's the cow. I have one cow. Maybe if I'm lucky, I can get 3 cows. I can't think of a job of like being like a typesetter, right? Like that. What are you talking about? It doesn't even enter my head. So that's like what we saw on the internet, right? Like when newspapers first came online, they're just printing up PDFs of the physical paper. Like every day, New York Times would put a PDF. Like it's like
horrible.
Put the thing up there.
Yeah.
And then like that's Web 1.0, and then Web 2.0. They're like, or the next generation, Web 1.5. They're like, hey, maybe we can use the new technology to do something new, not just like the old, but the same way, but new. So then they had this crazy idea of like searching, and you'd have a search box in it, right? Like it was crazy. And then you could go in there. And so like, that's kind of where we're at right now. We've done the old newspaper, we're at the PDF, and we're searching. The thing we can't yet imagine is like, what happens when like we really bake business cases and experiences into the nature of the technology, right? Like Web 2.0, like it's not like Twitter, right? Like it's not like, that's very different than having a PDF up once a day, right? I can get that. Oh, I can search the PDF. That's cool. Wait, this going back and forth conversation or Discord or Telegram, like I can't, there's no way someone could conceive of what that experience would be like 30 years ago, right? Like that's kind of the point we're at right now. Yeah. We just, Web 2.0, we put up our newspaper, and Web 2, we were able to search it. Right now with Web 3, we're about to do this great technical like unlock. And the unlock isn't just going to be technical and better features and functions, like a slicker feel. The technology literally gives us like economic, it pays for us to work together instead of screaming at each other, right? And so like that's like the fundamental transformative thing. What happens when all my users are my co-owners and we can work together, right? Like that's like amazing things happen when communities can coordinate and there's no middleman taking out a piece. Yeah. And so like, where does it go? Like to your point on Ready Player One, like what I actually think, like I'll throw a couple ideas out at you and you can just think about it. Like crypto's like so crazy. Like back when I'm talking about in the Renaissance, there was no nation. No one had an idea of like a nation. There was no, that was like after everything fell apart, they started building it back up. And then they said, hey, there's an idea. It's called a country and you're part of it. And like, guess what? You're Frenchman, German, Englishman, Brazilian. Like, you're like, what?
I see where you're going.
People just imagine this community and then they made it real by wrapping it with legal contracts and by wrapping it with money. Yeah. And that's what crypto's doing. Crypto's a community of people working together, and then they're wrapping it with legal contracts, smart contracts, and they're wrapping it with money. So like crypto is this next version of the nation state. Yeah. That's why the fight isn't for regulation and the fight isn't for, you know, them saying you can't do this or that. They're nervous, not just because crypto is making money. Like AI is going to replace your job. Crypto is like expanding who you are. It's allowing you to like choose your own nation state, right? And how you like make a living and who how you like
identify with, and
and how you own that. And so like, if that's true, like then this metaverse stuff gets really interesting, right? Like the thing that we have today that we didn't have at the last Renaissance is this NFT. And like when I say NFT, you know, if I say crypto, people are like, oh, you're trading Dogecoin. It can be more than that, like we're talking about. When I say NFT, it's not just pixelated cats. It can be more than that, right? It like literally is on-chain rights for digital assets or real world assets, right? So everything in the crypto's like big, but everything in the real world, just like when we had limited liability and the stock market, things became corporations, everything went onto the market and then it redistributed wealth. Yeah. You know, it's super concentrated, not as much this time. This time will be bigger. That's what's happening. Like NFTs allow me to, you know, wrap intellectual property, to wrap culture, to wrap real estate, to wrap all sorts of things in the real world and bring them on chain to give you that. And so that's like, that gets like really crazy. And then, so instead of having just like a internet where I'm chatting back and forth, if I have a metaverse and I have real world rights that give me ownership in the real world for assets and on the verse for assets, then I can work in the real world, enjoy the fruits of it in metaverse, right? Like instead of having a car, I can have a punk, right? Yeah. Or I can work in the metaverse. I can join this DAO and I'm doing something there, cash out, enjoy the fruits of it. Instead of having a punk, I can go get a car. Like we'll have this bi-directionality of it. So a lot of the sci-fi is totally like just dystopian. I don't see it that way. I see these NFTs as like two-way doors, bi-directional doors to the metaverse where I can go in and out. Yeah. Like I think that's kind of where it shakes out after a while if I were going to predict things.
Yeah. I'll get, if you'll let me, I'll say my prediction.
Oh yeah. No, I'd love to hear it. Please. Absolutely.
Like with Ready Player One, right? Like the whole premise was this dystopian world, right? Like you just had so many people in poverty living in the stacks, which is just like these like, it's like a high rise for poverty. Like it's like people had they're living in these shacks and they're like weirdly put together on cars. And it was just like the world that probably went to crazy. So it's like based in 2045, which is not that long away. And people's whole world revolved around the goggles, right? AR and VR, like our VR, what we're seeing is coming. It's been slowly going up and hitting its growth curve. But what I see is like Facebook is just one of these worlds and they might be a closed world and we'll see how they adapt. But Decentraland, I'm plugging crypto voxels, right? BitCountry, these new game-like worlds we might see it as are like, we already live in these worlds online with Instagram, with Zoom, with Twitter, with Facebooks, right? So I love to say we had the white paper, yellow papers, right? Pre-internet, and we just moved that to a digital framework, right? We just made paper a TV.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We made these large networks, right? Like you said, www was amazing. Those creators, man, they deserve like trillions of dollars, right? But they didn't get any value out of that. Those networks wasn't, like you said, wrapped in money. So now it's like, let's fund these new protocols, communication systems called Bitcoin, called Ethereum, called different internet. So there's not just one internet, right? And there's already different networks between different countries, right? Nation states. But now Ethereum has $400 billion. Bitcoin has $400 billion of their network, which is dispersed across hundreds of thousands, yet millions of people to help build this ecosystem. Right? How does that happen? Oh, you have so much supply and the demand is the people who buy the supply and build these networks so they could like create value and you could build on top of these things. So I think if we once we build these metaverses, which cryptocurrencies, right, is just like you said, your investment into this company, right? And so if it's like Mana, which is Decentraland, right, you become a part of that nation. But what if it's Wilder Group has their own world? So what I'm really getting at is like, I see many worlds that you could hop in and out of, right? What if I'm in the comic book world or the sports world or the even worlds that don't even make sense today, right? Like I want unicorns and lollipops and like, I just see a whole bunch of different worlds as big or as small as they want to be. And you could go in and out of them, right? And the NFT, right, that non-fungible token can help you get in and out. Some you probably will get in for free, like say VeeFriends, right? Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
Right? He gets it, right? He's saying, hey, if you buy a V, you can get into my conference. Well, this is your new ticket. This is your new asset, right? You can use it as a currency, this NFT, but like you own it, right? You could sell it, but also like it gives you access to different things. Just like the apes, right? There's 10,000 of them. Now people are recognizing them like, dang, you're a part of this community. You're kind of cool. Now it's like, oh, what if Bankless does this, right? Or, Break-In Gang, like what if Break-In becomes a DAO or a big community, right? Like, cause I have ideas. But like, and we have an NFT. It's like, oh, if you buy one of these 10,000, you get to come to my online conference because we just built a huge stadium in like online.
Yeah,
we could go in it and like it's a thing. It seems crazy, but like we're already online at home all day anyways, or these different places, right? But I see, like you said, I think the reason why for us is like we shouldn't be super afraid of it is that like I think it's more of the digital being connected with the physical. And so just how we'll have a virtual reality, we'll have an augmented reality where, Josh, your hat will change. I already see it online. Like, hey, maybe I want it to be like red today. And it'll just be like, I'll change it. So I said a lot there, but I think it'll just be like whatever you want to create online, you can create it.
No, it's like your point about the sci-fi is really, I haven't thought about that before. That's like really good. Like every one of those dystopian worlds is a Web 2.0 dystopia, right? Mm-hmm. It's like it's one company. Everybody's living on the stacks because they don't own any of the.
They didn't get any wealth. Right? They didn't get any part of the pie.
Yeah, so it's like every one of those. There's always some corporation running things. No one else owns a piece of it, and so like you have this inefficiency and this inequity. It's like they're always Web 2.0s. That's what happens if like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, like if they win, that's what it looks like, right? Okay. And so like, but imagine Ready Player One. Do it as a thought experiment. Imagine whatever the bad corporation wasn't a corporation. It was like a DAO or a protocol, and like everybody in the stack is owning a piece of that. Every time they put on the glasses, they own a piece of that, and that value as you go over time. Like all of a sudden, that changes the economic model, and the virtual world changes what happens in like the real world. That's crazy. Like that's the opportunity. And like you're saying, the metaverses, like these universes, we're starting to see that right now, right? Like they're starting to link them up. That's why, people are talking about loot, and like loot's very abstract. It's for like the Dungeons and Dragons guys that can like close their eyes and tell the story or whatever, right? Yeah. But it's like the Wilder guys are doing the same thing. They're building Wyoming. They LiDAR scanned in Miami, and they're building it. But then they have something called a 0IO protocol, and that like literally allows them to connect it between that world and the next world, which is like rainbows and lollipops and unicorns, and the next world. And so like these things like will link up, and then like being able to link it into real life, like that's why it's important. So real life isn't this burned out shell if everybody owns pieces of that. The thing is, these companies, these crypto companies, they try to give it away, right? If you open up a wallet, they give you their coin for just doing it, but they can't give it away to everybody, right? So like you actually have to interact with it, and you have to participate with it. Yeah. So like that's the opportunity, right? Like it's like just learn this stuff, like do a little bit of time, figure out how you can get into crypto, and make it like a thought exercise. Say, hey, what do I like doing now? Oh, I like listening to music. I like creating music. I like watching stuff. I like reading stuff. And like, where am I spending money? Oh, I spend money for rent. I spend money for, and then say, okay, how could I use crypto? What is out there? Because there are things out there. Like if you set up Helium when it first came on, it's like 6-7 figures in the bank, right? For a $300 box. Like it's like crazy, not for buying anything, right? Like just to give you a sense. I'm like, okay, maybe that only happened once. Maybe when they turn on 5G, maybe it happens again. Yeah. Maybe it happens with Audius, right? It might not just be a little extra spending money. It might be like crazy. And so like
money
worst case, you learn some stuff. Yeah. Like best case, it's crazy. And not just like crazy, like financially rewarding. Like the thing I guess I'd leave you with is that in history, like it's ironic, it's paradoxical that most of the time, the bigger the change is, the less people are aware of it, right? It's like you're aware of the little waves on the top, but the deep currents are like, so you don't even see those changing, right? You don't even notice it. Yeah. And like, we're in this world where like the whole thing's changing, man, right? And like, you're not going to notice it. It's going to happen little by little every day. You hear a little bit more, you hear a little bit more. It's like, and so like, we actually get to like be aware of it. And you don't have a medieval lord telling you can't do it. You can literally do it. You don't have like the state of Massachusetts saying you can't buy Apple. You can literally go in and like, just like, play with the crypto, and like you'll earn by doing it, right? And like, so like you don't get this many opportunities, and like we have a chance to like not only be aware of it, but shape it and craft it. And then to your other point, like exercise, not just take the opportunity, but exercise responsibility. Like how do we help other people get access to this? Like they don't care what you look like. You can be completely anonymous like all day long, right? Like you just need to know about it and go do it. And so like it's really an educational function for this off-chain integration. And so like, that's why I just like leave you and say like the conversation you're having and what you're doing is just so important. It's like important in ways that like we aren't even aware of now. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. We want to help everybody break into the future from, people in the palaces, people in the hood, everywhere. And how can people keep in touch with you?
Oh, me? Just Joshua.Rosenthal. Twitter is the easiest way. Just easy enough. Like, yeah, that's probably the best.
I'll pick.
Oh yeah, no, I did that way back when before punks. I know. Talk about yeah, no. I don't know. Maybe I'll set up a MySpace page just to be like ironic. Actually,
That'd be funny. I do have one last question though.
Yeah, sure.
So like you have Sixth Event, which is like you all's kind of venture firm, and I'm in venture capital myself. Like you all have invested in a lot of projects and helped the space a lot. And I'm super interested, like even in crypto VC. Is that kind of old? Like, how does crypto VC stay pure?
Oh man, yeah, like, you're asking all the right questions. So we're
like, how do you like? Is that kind of like? Is that
nah? So you get into the whole right. So like, and it kind of ties to the question you asked earlier. Is like, hey, does Amazon and Apple, do they persist along with this crypto? There'll be crypto versions of it, but they might actually buy their way into crypto, right? They might disintermediate themselves by buying into crypto and like through acquisition, maybe, or maybe they just get replaced. So they may exist. The same thing with VC. Like in the old world, you had like this old world VC. And like if you watch the very, very best crypto VC funds, they're all these kind of people that went off on their own. They left the fund, they went off, they saw it early. There's a couple like alternative examples that have just raised ungodly amounts of money, but they're almost like private equity at that point because their funds are so big, like their fund size dictating their strategy. And so like there's a role as crypto like splits
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like crypto split. There's two kind of sides to crypto. There's the CeFi side, which is like crypto as a business model and Rails replacing all this stuff. And there you have to have like venture capital money is like helpful to do that. There's the DeFi side, which is wild and woolly, and that allows anyone access to anything, basically. And so we kind of play in the middle where we'll even invest in other venture capital funds doing their thing over here. We'll do stuff directly through coins. We'll do kind of traditional allocation. The point of this is like some of that goes away like for twofold. One, if you're starting something out, you might not need the venture capital that you think you need, and especially in crypto, because you can like you have an economic toolbox to do all sorts of things. It's like
well,
yeah, exactly. It's like crowdfunding, but you have a new tool set.
Yeah.
And if you do want it from venture folks, you can actually look. All the old venture guys are like, "Hey, we'll help you out. How can we help you? We put our companies together and achieve portfolio synergy." And it's like crypto lets you actually see if they do that or not because it's on the chain, right? So I can say, "Hey, did these guys do what they said they're going to do? Did they provide liquidity?" And it gives you these opportunities to stack protocols, right? So like maybe I'm running Helium, but at the same time I'm actually processing on decentralized protocol and I'm actually validating that, so I can like stack and double down, and like it allows anyone to get in. Basically, I can be buying. Maybe I missed out on the exclusive allocation. Fine, I wait till it hits an initial market. Fine, now I have access to it. Maybe it's so early, they're not set up, I can't get initial market. So I just run the processor, right? I buy a $200 Helium box, I'm running the thing, right? Like, so like it lets VCs, it changes the nature of VCs and makes it much more fluid. And across this long tail, it allows me to pick particular spots that I can get super deep and super involved in. And it also extends, like we can call ourselves crypto VCs, but like it turns everybody into an entrepreneur, right? Like all of a sudden, like maybe I'm not even investing in these tokens. I'm just listening to audience, but I own the token. I see the price going up and the price going down. I'm like, hey, do I want to keep it? What do I believe in? And so I think like crypto venture will definitely persist. It'll get more specialized. They tend to be crypto first funds. That's kind of capital begetting capital. So that is concentrated, but like along this long curve, anyone has access to it. So like, I don't have to wait. I can actually get in when the thing's first there, right? And like, maybe I don't get 1,000x, maybe I only get 100. Well, that's like still tenfold what traditional VC used to earn, right? So it's like, and I can do it at a fraction. I can do it at $20 if I feel like it. So like, yeah, I think it'll open it up to everybody. So I'd strongly encourage you to like get into it while we have this opportunity.
Yeah. Say less. Thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. This is great. So you got to come back.
No, thanks. And thanks for doing this. This education is like, if people are listening to this and you just ignored everything else, just like literally find a crypto version of something you like to do and like use that. And as you open a wallet, you'll see coins go into it and then say, hey, how can I do this with the rest of my life? Or work from the other side. Say, what am I interested in? I'm interested in sketching. I'm interested in drawing. My boss doesn't like me doing that while I'm at work. Well, then actually like go and find in crypto, like how can I get paid to draw? Like through a DAO, through doing this, through sketch art, like, so there's like different ways. Like the world is like, it's just opened up in front of you. You might not see it, so you have to look a little bit, but it's there. And like that's the flip side for being early. Like when it's obvious and it's shoved in your face, you don't have the same asymmetric upside. So the door is open, like go find it and walk through it. And like thank you, Josh, for showing everybody what door to walk through. I think it's super important and doing more good than you can possibly realize.
Yeah, no more barbarians at the gate. You gotta. That's
No,
that's
exactly
what this
right.
is about. That's why I came in, because that's what Satoshi, whoever that person is, Martin, the new Martin Luther, wanted to do, and that's my where I stand. So, thank you so much. This was awesome, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right. Best possible worlds. Let's build the future.
Let's do it. Break
Take
in.
care now. Bye.
Bye. So you all heard it. Don't wait. Your time is now to break into the future. Whether you buy crypto or not, you could hop into Web3, which is this ownership, which is value. You play to earn. You earn what you do, what you use, just in a new fashion. And new things you probably don't exist. What are you interested in? We're gonna look back at this episode. There's gonna be tons of views on it, but more importantly, that you learn and you take free game from this. This is about educating you guys. This is free game. This is break into the future. Josh Rosenthal, the history, the now, the future. Don't let it waste. Use it. Your time is now. Love you guys. I'm out.